This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode.
The Daily Leader is back up and running. Man, it is good. What a good day that we have today. We got, I don't know how this keeps happening. We have so many of Brad's friends come in here, and I feel like there's a competition between myself and Brad. I feel like I have more friends than him, to be honest, but he keeps winning the day. It's very frustrating to me. But I am super excited for our guest that Brad is going to introduce kindly in just a moment. Don't make that face, Brad. Our listeners on, online that can't see you don't get to see your smug little face, and it makes me mad. Other things that you should know about Daily Leader. Hey, we do like if you would take a minute, like, subscribe, smash that button. I can't say that. I can't say that with a straight face, but whatever platform you are on, if you would follow us, it certainly helps us advance our mission of developing 1 million leaders around the world, which is what Brad and I are very passionate about doing, is developing people. So if you would like that, if you like our content, we'd encourage you to please go ahead and do that. And we'd also encourage you, if you are interested in more of this, we not only have a podcast, we have an entire community that you can join in and become a part of. So you can continue the conversation with both our guests that we have on, plus other people that are like you, network, meet them, talk, figure out what they're doing. What are they doing that's working? What's not? What's wanted and needed in their business and yours? If any of that sounds like it's of interest to you, I would encourage you to check out our brand new, I guess it's not that new now, but community for the Daily Leader that we have going on. You can find all that in the show notes section, wherever you are listening. But we'd encourage you to engage with that. And then Brad and I also, little announced to the world, but up and coming, we both run coaching businesses. But not only do we have our individual practices, we actually collaborate on one where we have a group coaching space. And we'd love for you to be a part of that. Brad and I feel like there's often almost more power in the group than there ever is one-on-one, because you not only get to be with us, which us is just illuminating how great of a person you are and all the possibilities that might come to pass if you got really confident in yourself and clear on your, current situation and clear on your future, but also all that you can learn from all those other people. Man, they're a really good time. So if you're curious about that, shoot us an email, check out the Daily Leader group, and we'd love to tell you more about that. All right. So that's a lot of talking. I'm 2 minutes and 30 minutes into my own monologue here. And with that, that's enough of Taylor. Brad, would you take a minute and introduce our guest today that we are excited to have?
Yes, it would be my pleasure. I'm very excited to introduce, and this is the first time that I've ever said this, and this feels awesome because I've known our guest for a long time, and this designation is a long time in the making. Lots of hard work, lots of sacrifice, maybe blood, definitely sweat and tears. There could have been some bloodshed in the process that, that could have happened, but most definitely sweat and tears. But welcome to the show, Dr. Daniel Watts. It is fantastic to get to have you. Daniel is a husband to Liz. He's a father to two young children, and he is a PhD in management. He received that PhD from Georgia State University in organizational behavior. He's a brand new assistant professor of management at Baylor University in the, how do I say the name of the school, by the way? I was reading that over. I should have asked you that, but it's a doozy.
I think the best way I've heard it said is hand-kamer, but I'm not positive, so I might get corrected on that.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery.
Right, it is. A lot of people call it different things here, for sure.
Yeah. So he's an associate professor at the Hand-Kamer School of Business at Baylor University, and that's a new role for him. But he comes to Baylor by way of Deloitte Consulting, and before that, Hitachi Consulting. And he also had little stints during his education at both Wells Fargo and Newell Rubbermaid, in addition to others. So, Daniel, I am stoked to get to have you on the show. And Daniel and I know each other through our time at Impact 360 Institute, where we were both fellows and served in various capacities, both volunteer and through some employment. And he's just an incredible guy, genuine, authentic, sincere, and extremely competent. And I think that any time that I find a person who has both the warmth and the care that Daniel has and the competence that Daniel has in one human being, I'm like, how can I have more of that person in my life? How can I introduce that person to more of my friends? And so Daniel is a great example of someone who's the total package. He's got both sides of the coin. And I just can't wait to hear all the insights that he has. But before we get to Daniel's story and what he uh, what he discovered and articulated in his dissertation, I think we have to rotate him on the spigot above the fire. What do you say, TJ?
Well, Daniel, now is that time. I'm really hoping that the team can find some catchy. I kind of see this. We need like an intro song, a slow burn. Yeah. Like from the 90s. You know what I mean? I've been very sentimental recently.
I want like metal. I want like I want some dark. I want some, yeah. I want like the,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's got to be the mixture between like, hey, we're giving you the, 90s jingle where it feels catchy, but also it's like, oh my God, what's happening? Heavy metal. We can figure that out. We can play with that. Yeah, it's a both and. It's not a either or. It's a both and, right? That can exist, guys. So, Daniel, I know we talked about this little in the green room before show because we're so fancy. We have our own virtual green room. Oh, geez, yeah, very nice. No snacks though. Sorry about that. But the goal of slow burn started off as supposed to be rapid fire, ended up being slow because we get onto tangents. We do all kinds of things, which is the name of the game. But the whole hope is, hey, look, leadership, there's a lot of tensions. We're managing tensions all the time and paradoxes. So we're going to give you two things that, man, you may want to actually choose both. Say, hey, what's more important as a leader, as somebody who's leading themselves, their families, and a group of people? What would you have to choose? So we're going to give you two things, rock in a hard place, essentially. And we're going to say, hey, pick one and why. And you get about 15 seconds to tell us. And, who knows? We may end up on a tangent and never even make it to the rest of the show because that's what happens sometimes. But I do have a scoring system, which I can't tell you how it works. I will tell you your score on occasion, and we just go from there. And you will be judged very heavily on it. Does that sound fair?
That sounds absolutely, yeah, just in my opinion, very, very reasonable.
Yes, yes. Well, I am very just in my, giving points. So on that, let's jump in. And this is where I do the wow, like that's kind of the way I see it. Okay. All right. What's more important? We always ask this one. I think it's super important. All right. What is more important to leaders, being or doing?
Oh man, I've listened to your podcast enough to have heard people's responses to this, and I know people usually go for B, so I actually was ready for this one, and I'm going to make the case for doing. I think that being is really important. I think people have already made that case, but I think that one of the things that I see people struggle with the most is putting action to their heart. And so you can believe it and feel it all you want, but there's something about bringing life to what you believe and where your heart is at. And so when you really do something with it, uh, we call it conation. It's the actual taking the motivation and the actual action to follow up what you think and what your beliefs are. And so I think there's a really good case for doing is maybe the most important thing about us.
That's great. Man, you nailed that. I had to look up conation. I was like, oh, there's a word for the day that I haven't
Right,
heard
yeah.
before. I'm gonna have to, man, that was solid. I think
So long game.
that's a great point, man. That's a great point. If I just talk and I say, hey, I'm gonna be him, but I never do, then what is
Mm,
it? Then what have I really done?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all right, all right. We're going with
Cases for
doing.
both.
Yeah,
Cases for both.
yeah,
Yeah.
372.5 points on your first one. You're off to a good start. So, yeah, I know. It was a close
Mm,
call, but we're in the clear. All right.
good.
Number
Good.
two, what's more important? And remember, we're talking leadership. How do I lead myself,
Hmm.
my team, my family, whoever it is, my business? All right. Relationships or results?
Ooh, that's another classic. Um, I think that I think that I'm gonna have my cake and eat it too, and say that it depends on situations. So from a culture perspective, when you're starting culture, you want to start with what we call external adaptation, and so that would be more results driven. How well equipped are you to actually meet a market demand? But over time, you start to actually have more care and concern for the people that are connected to you, and I think relationships start to rule the day. So maybe it depends on if it's, what stage you're in, but I'd say when you start out, maybe results are really important. You can't do much unless you actually have something to show for it. And then as things start to really roll, I think the relationships become um, the juice that really makes it run.
Okay. I like that. We have not had that answer before. By the way, you found a loophole in the system to go with a both and. So good for you. I think the judges are going to overlook that one at the moment. So you still scored some points. We don't know how many, but good job, man. No, I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, that's a really good point of, what if the relationships came after? And you said, what was the word you? God, you have a great vocabulary, by the way. I just want you to know that. I'm already observant about that. Talk to me about you just talk more about that. Like you were talking about the market demands at the beginning. What do you mean by that in terms of seeing results at the beginning? You just unpack that a little bit more for me and the listeners.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this whole part is about kind of the competing interests, and there's actually some really good research called the competing values framework, which it pits these two tensions against each other, external adaptation and internal integration. And it highlights that fundamentally leaders, especially when they're trying to create culture, have to deal with both of those things. But what we find is that usually when you're an entrepreneur in that kind of setting, external adaptation is the focus. You have to have some product that people will actually buy and need. You need to be able to adapt to what the people are asking for. But everybody who's been an entrepreneur knows, then you start forming a team and everybody's doing a little bit of everything and it's just a mess. But then as time goes by, you do internal integration. You start structuring teams and saying, hey, you're really good at this. Can you do more of that? And hey, I'm better at this. Can I maybe take that off your plate so that you can focus on what you're maybe more gifted in, or something that we really need more help in? And so then we start to see what we call internal integration. Yeah, that kind of takes on a new light.
That's great. I love that,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, if you have something at the beginning that doesn't produce results, you will actually never have a team to lead.
Yes, right, exactly.
So got no buy-in. I love that. All right, we're gonna move on. Score, you're doing well. That's what the judges have to say about that. All right, next one, values or vision.
Oh, well, without a vision, the people perish. I'd say it's pretty important to have a vision. Um, I don't know. I'm gonna go for vision on this one. I feel like vision is really important. I think sometimes we figure out our values as we flesh out a vision. You don't know what you value maybe until you've got a sense for what you're called to and what you're moving towards.
Yeah, I think as you're moving towards that vision, your values will surface. That's for sure.
True, yeah, right. For better or worse, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
exactly. And then you got to evaluate sometimes, like, oh, maybe I didn't even know that I valued that. Do I want to value that, or do I need to change that? Right. But that's an interesting perspective. Okay, going with vision. I like it. I like it. That's great. All right, culture or productivity, man.
Well, I mean, a lot of my research is in culture, so I'm obviously going to choose culture here for sure. I think it's Herb Keller, right, who says culture eats strategy for lunch, right? If you don't have a good culture, things start to fall apart. And so, I mean, productivity is important, and maybe in smaller teams, it's hard to build culture. So maybe productivity takes a bigger role there. But if you don't have a good culture, you're not going to be able to sustain the good productivity that you create. You get things like burnouts, you get things like competing interests or priorities. So I think a culture makes it possible to sustain the productivity that you want to see long term.
Mm. Can you pause right there? I'm going to put you on the spot and say, hey, if you were to give a 60-second pitch on how to develop good culture in your company, like a quick framework, would you be able to pitch that tent and sell it to me real fast?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, you have to tell really great stories. That's the first thing. Culture is built on stories. If you have a good story and you tell it often, people will get a sense for what's valued, rewarded, and supported. which is what we call culture, right? The norms, values, beliefs, and underlying assumptions about what's valued, rewarded, and supported. That's the definition of culture. And so if you want to create that, we call these artifacts. What you put on your walls matters a lot. If you're measuring something, put it up on the wall, put it on a big placard and have, 5 days. We know that, for example, safety climate, if you want to have safety climate, you put up a sign that says X number of days since our last accident. And people then recognize safety matters here. So what you put on the walls is an artifact, but then also the stories you tell make a huge difference, because if you can tell compelling and good stories that celebrate the things that you want to see more of, while also drawing attention to the behaviors that you're trying to kind of avoid, you create a culture, a strong culture, which means it's deeply held. People really believe it, and it's widely shared. It's agreed upon across the organization. So it has to be stories and artifacts like the things on your walls that really create that environment.
That's great, man. That's so good. I love to try and kind of land the high thought plane of like, okay, practically, what does this look like a little bit? Because we can get caught in the clouds and go, what does this actually look like? But I think the idea of telling our stories, which almost goes back to, hey, what is your vision? So that you can tell your team the story of your vision and look for places to highlight your team meeting that vision and living out those values. Like we've talked on the podcast so much about how people are like, man, culture is a kegger and a ping pong table. I'm not saying it really is, but those are all the like 2000s, early 2000s movies about, Google and the cool things that they're doing. But actually, that culture was probably created way more by talking about the vision and the things that they want to highlight more than it ever was, right? The building and the standard operating procedures and so forth. So that's great. I hope our listeners really hear that is, hey, if you're thinking about you want to influence your culture, what stories are you telling your team? What stories are you posting on your walls and putting in front of you so that you remember them every day? What tattoos are you getting that say this is our team, right? Right now I was talking to.
Yes, team tats. I think that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
want to say one thing
Let's all
about
do this.
I want to say one thing about ping pong tables, right? The beauty of ping pong is it's a two-person game that goes back and forth, right?
Mm,
So some of why ping pong might be a really good cultural icon or cultural artifact
yeah.
is it creates spaces for people to get out of their computers and to have a third thing, right? And
Mm,
and research shows that guys in particular really come around third things. If you want to have a meaningful conversation, oftentimes guys will play a game or they'll do something or they'll go watch sports and they'll have that third thing. And it's not universally a guy or girl thing, but it is definitely a trend. And so ping pong is actually a great cultural artifact on some level, not because of the table itself, but
yeah.
because of the context it creates for informal conversation and meaningful interaction.
Dude, that is so good because we hate on it. We hate on it on the show a little bit. Not,
Sure.
I mean, I guess more the idea of it than the actual. I mean, I love ping pong. We grew up playing ping pong. My family's. It's like our at Christmas time. That's what we go after. Like we're always playing
That's
each other.
awesome.
But the truth is, you're right. That is meant for a specific reason. But it
Mhm.
isn't. It isn't in replacement of the overarching theme of telling the story, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes,
that
exactly.
is in addition to. So, hey, if I want to get a good culture, I care about my people, and that's part of my vision for this company. Yeah, I create spaces for people to connect outside of work where they can
Yes.
actually build and become a better team, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's dude, that is cool. Well, I could stay here all day. I'm gonna let Brad keep going with the burn.
Well, right along the same lines, guys, of this is, the paradox of performance and recovery. So, Daniel, if you had to choose between either high performance or high recovery, which direction would you go in?
I think this is a great question, and I think that uh, I'm going to turn it on its head a little bit to say I think that great performance is sustained in such a way that recovery is built into great performance. If you're working so hard that you are at your wit's end and completely burnt out by the end of a work week, and and you can't do anything but recover, you're probably not working in a way that's going to sustain that positive performance. So I would say that I would say that performance itself is critical. And then another thing that's worth mentioning is that when you're performing something that you really believe in and that is meaningful and that brings you life, I think that it can, in some sense, be a form of recovery as well. I know a lot of people that do things as hobbies that I would consider work, and I know a lot of people that do see what I'm doing and think man, that looks like work. And I think, oh, this is a hobby. This is fun, right? So I think that on some level, the idea of recovery necessitates this idea of kind of strenuous labor. And there's plenty of that to go around, but I'd say that the actual um, productivity, the actual like doing something of value and meaning, that goes a long way. And if you do it well and do it right, sometimes recovery just naturally is built into that process and can sustain. So I don't know. Maybe I'm leaning into the tension, right? I don't give you a formal answer there, but both and maybe again.
I love it. I love it. That's the idea. As someone who's in academia, I'm I'm very curious to see how you approach this paradox, and it's the tension between questions and answers. What's more important in leadership, asking good questions or giving sound answers?
Oh man, in my opinion, it feels like a no-brainer, and I may be too inexperienced to see the other side of this, but I'd say 10 out of 10, it's the good questions. A person who can ask a really good question, and Brad, you're an expert at this. Every time that we've ever had any interactions, you ask such poignant questions and questions that articulate how competent you already are in something, and then bring to light the opportunity for meaningful engagement that goes beyond and pushes the conversation forward. Um, I think that if you can have great questions, um, you can go so much farther and do so much more. In part also because it invites it invites more people into the discussion. I think one of the things that being an academic, because you mentioned that in particular, has taught me is I've watched people who are my mentors, my role models, the people I'm looking to emulate, and I've watched them say I don't know to more questions than I do, an infinitely larger number of questions than I do. Some of the people I follow the most closely, it's almost painful because you keep asking them, "Hey, what's the right answer here?" And they'll say, I know a lot about a little bit about how management's done, and I don't know everything there is to know about that topic. So I can't tell you the right answer there, but I can help you figure out the types of questions that will get you to the right answer. And I would say that that's great leadership is when we can help people arrive at the right answers themselves in things that we might not know off the top of our own heads.
That's insightful. As someone who is in a university setting, right, that is very characterized by tradition, right? Uh, what's more important to you in leadership, tradition or innovation?
Oh, that's a stumper. Oh, Taylor's enjoying this stumper.
I am. Yeah.
Um,
You've got a great brain. I'm enjoying watching your brain hard at work. It's awesome,
thanks.
man. It's really great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. Um, Tradition or innovation? I mean, I'm gonna go with tradition. Um, I think that ironically, our world has become consumed with innovation and starved of tradition. And so I wouldn't say it's universally true, but I'd say in our day and age right now, tradition is a powerful, powerful um, force. And I hear this a lot with sports teams, right? I've heard a lot of I heard an interview with a very well known college basketball coach who was talking about how his organization is flourishing and successful and looking at maybe having a third national championship in a row just because of the traditions that they have. And in a world that's innovating constantly, I think that tradition stands in stark contrast. People say, why do we do things like that? And you say, because we've seen over and over and over and over again that it works. Um, so the question is, are your traditions aiding your performance? Are your traditions still rich and valuable? And I think that if you have outdated traditions, then maybe they're not valuable. But if you have rich and good traditions that continue to produce, I'd say that's better than innovation any day.
I love that. I love that. I'm assuming it's UConn's coach that I can't remember his name. No, I like, yeah, you can use whoever's name you want. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Yeah, I mostly love any sports references because Brad's like, wait, UConn is what's basketball? There's a ball and you put it in a hoop but man, that's great. That's great. Yeah, processing your traditions through that lens of like, hey, are these traditions helping move me forward and getting us the results that we want? Which in that case, you go, that's a very successful program that is stuck to their tradition. They're not having to, why everybody else is out there trying to innovate in, the basketball world and in the world of one and dones, they're kind of going with a different approach that is working very well for them. So it's a
Can
good
I
question.
say one thing on this too, actually? So there's a culture question that you're asking here too, and I think that tradition, some of the work that I'm actually currently doing talks about what do leaders do when their cultures become toxic or problematic, and it's to the same question. What do you do when your traditions become counterproductive to what you're actually aiming to accomplish as an organization or as a team or as a person? And um, we're conceptualizing these ideas of contrarians or people who actually voice, hey, where we're going right now is not where we want to go. It's not what's going to be fruitful for our mission, for our goals. And I think that great leaders are uh, they don't just have vision for creating something, they have vision for when things need to be adjusted or tweaked, and the hope is that you can catch it and make finite changes, small changes that address it before you have to wholesale change your entire culture because it's now outdated. Kodak is a great example of that, right? I brought this up to my students just a couple days ago. Kodak, when digital cameras came out, made this big bet, and they said, "I don't think that's actually going to happen. We're great at this thing. We do film really well, and we're the best at it. So we're going to keep doing that." And you could call that tradition, right? We have a long-standing tradition of kind of high quality cameras. Let's keep doing it. And no one with at least enough power or voice stood up and said, "Hey, I see a changing of the tide. We really need to take this seriously and innovate." So certainly traditions, I think, are powerful in our day and age, but they can be powerfully problematic as well.
Hmm. That's so good. Yeah, are you humble enough to keep looking at your traditions, and are they leading you in the direction that you really want them to go? That they originally, because you probably set them up for a reason, right? You said, "Hey, this tradition aligns with my value and my vision," right? And sometimes we just have to come back and go, "Hey, is that tradition still doing that, or am I stuck?" Right? In that case, they're stuck. Sears catalog, they were stuck. Circuit City, hey, I'm stuck, right? I'm doing the same, which is the definition of insanity. We're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Like, okay, well, maybe that tradition isn't moving the needle forward for you. But oh, gosh, I love that. That's so good. Okay, let's keep going because I think a lot of this stuff is going to keep surfacing, and I want to know more about you. We got some questions coming up on your dissertation and all those kind of things, but give me your story. You can start wherever you want. Like, hey, I was a baby, 6 pounds, 4 ounces, or you can just give us, hey, here's the highlights of me and who I am, my family, and how I got to where I am. So,
Yeah, sure. I mean, interestingly, and I don't just say this because, I'm interacting with Brad here, but I typically start my story of kind of my professional career, at least at Impact 360, a gap year program, now the Fellows program, that we both did. It was a formative time in my life where I got exposed to servant leadership in particular and challenged on really what it means to be a leader. And I came in thinking I knew all the answers, and I pretty quickly over the course of that year discovered just how much, to our conversation earlier, just how much more valuable questions were than answers, and started to have a lot more of them. And so when I got back to Georgia Tech, where I was doing my undergrad, I had this professor walk into the room for one of my first classes once I was back there, and he started talking about servant leadership. And I said, I need to know more. I want to know more. I just came from this gap year program, this wonderful transformational program. And so I began doing research with him, and still to this day work with him a good amount, examining servant leadership and understanding how it functions. So servant leadership is a big, big emphasis for me professionally. But then I also became passionate about how does this get lived out in organizations. And so I knew I didn't want to go into academia straight out of undergrad. I didn't want to be that professor that walks in the room and is like, let me tell you how organizations run without having ever seen it and been in it. And so I went out and worked in, over a dozen different companies, whether in kind of my own experience or as a consultant and kind of coming into their environments. And I got to experience just the insides of a lot of different organizations and see how they work, see how they make decisions, see the dysfunction that exists in so many of these bigger organizations, especially Fortune 500, these kind of larger companies that have been around and just have a lot of tradition, a lot of long-standing ways that things are done. And so I did that for a while, and then I got married, and my wife said, "I don't love that you're traveling so much. Maybe it's time to go do that academic thing and just be home a little more." And so that was the impetus, and so I went full time into academia right after that, and got to work with some just wonderful, wonderful minds in servant leadership to start with, and then culture was an interest of mine, and so within culture, and we'll talk about what socialization is in a little bit, but there's a kind of a niche sort of area within culture about how do you get new people on board into your culture, how do you get them to buy into it, was really how it started for me, and so I study those two areas and yeah, just started at Baylor. I think you guys mentioned at the start here, and I've loved it. It's been a great place for me to flourish um, and get to start thinking about some of these things longer term with some real teeth, so to speak.
Baylor Bears, yeah, Baylor Bears. Let's go. Yeah.
Well, let's dive in, man. So give us kind of dissertation topic and then kind of give us your thesis and maybe a couple of key ideas. And then I think we'll see where the conversation goes. Taylor's going to take us off the rails at some point, which would be fun. So between now and then, set us up for surviving that.
Yeah. I just give you kind of a rundown of my work here, saying, yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so my research is born out of this question of what does it look like for new people to join teams, to come into organizations? This is what we call organizational socialization. And the question is, how do you help those people settle in to where they experience a sense of belonging and connection, and are also equipped to settle and to be productive? And so it's kind of the world of socialization. But everyone who thinks about it typically in a research domain thinks about just this new person. What's it like to be a new person in an organization, and how do they settle in, and what can we do to help them? But my curiosity increasingly turned to, what do the other people experience? You join a new team. There's all these people who you now are coming alongside, and those people have different reactions. I saw that a lot in my experience in consulting, but I also just started to notice it more and more in some of what I was reading and coming across. And so the question became, what about these people? Because we need those people to really be helpful. You can't really settle into an organization unless the people that you're joining come alongside you and really help you settle in and help you learn the ropes. And so my question became, what makes those people more or less willing to step in, and what's in it for them? And as a person who's really interested in leadership, I started to think there's something about helping those new people that helps to actually develop the types of things that make you a great leader as well. What if some of what the value of this kind of engagement could be is that you develop the types of skills and competencies as well as confidence that you need to then do similar things in a leadership capacity. So that's kind of the crux of my dissertation, is looking at who helps and why, and then how that then translates to them developing the confidence that they need to be an effective leader.
Hmm. I think that's so cool, man. That's such an interesting lens too. Yeah, it is. It really is. Of, hey, not just how do we help this new person get on our team, but what does that look like for the other people around that, right? It's the and how can, I would assume, how do we empower those people to almost empower themselves in the way that they lead? Is that a way to think about that? Or how, like, what do you encourage people to do in those situations?
Well, I think one of the biggest kind of practical implications here is that as you guys sit with so many leaders day in and day out, and I know that you do, people are starving for, how do I become a better leader? How do I develop into this? And we give them all sorts of ideas about how to develop certain skills or read certain books or maybe get certain get into certain contexts or whatever else. But sitting right in front of them so often is this opportunity to come alongside somebody and lead them, even though they're a peer. And so that's the cool, unique context that newcomers create, is this opportunity for them to lead. So I think a really practical piece of this is, if you want to develop great leaders, keep bringing people into your doors and call your call your highest potential leaders to be the people that help those folks adjust the organization. That's one of the best ways that they can develop the types of skills they're going to need to be a leader.
That's so cool, man. I love that. It's calling people up to just play the game. Like you can read all the books you want,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah,
hey, get in. You've got an opportunity to get in the game right here.
right. They're
So
right there. You want to
yeah,
lead someone? There they are. They're right here. Go for it. Yeah.
This is interesting. A little practical experience from my coaching business. I'm working with a client right now who's a part of one of the largest real estate land development companies in the world. It's fascinating conversations, and a younger guy has been in real estate, for this early portion of his career, and so he's not new to real estate. He even has some land experience, so he's accustomed to the vernacular. He's accustomed to the different roles and responsibilities that would be a part of a firm, and so he's acclimating really quickly to this new environment. However, there are a variety of relationships that he's having to navigate. It's not the competency part that's that difficult in this particular line of work, right? It's just learning the vocabulary and understanding what are the skill, the norm, sort of the benchmark behaviors. What's difficult is navigating the older, more tenured people in the business, right? And having the confidence to approach those conversations, having the courage to approach those conversations. And I feel like, Taylor, this is something you and I talk about a lot. We talk about how when emerging leaders are in the process of being developed, man, it's one thing to know what to do. It's a whole different set of skills to know how to do it. What does confidence mean in this process, Daniel?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think confidence is um, the belief that you have a capacity to accomplish your goals. Um, and in order to have confidence, typically you have to have prior experience or evidence from someone else's prior experience. And so, in order to develop that kind of confidence, y- y- it, I deal with this with students all the time, right? The job market, when you're going to get your first job, every job asks for 3 years of experience. Where am I going to get 3 years of experience for an entry level job, right? That's the natural next question. I, that's what I'm going to you to do, is to get my first experience. I think the same is true here too, even when it's not the job market. To For leaders, we want them to have leadership experience, but they're not in a position where they're given the authority to really lead someone. And so, absolutely, the confidence, the experience of acting in those ways, um, is developed through those positive experiences, those positive encounters where you were successful in exerting influence in a positive direction to change somebody else's behavior, which is kind of the quintessential idea that we would put behind leadership, is influencing someone towards a goal-directed behavior.
well, I was just thinking on that note, it's interesting how you're discussing this, right? Because, hey, here's somebody new. I got to go put this into practice, right? And I always think, and tell me if this resonates with you too, is that courage always precedes confidence. Like there is very little way to have that confidence without first having the courage to go have the conversation that you don't want to have. In other words, I can instill a whole bunch of good information in you, but you still have to have the courage to go, hey, here's a new person and my opportunity to lead. Once I get that rep, I gained my confidence muscle. It's grown. But the courage to do that, I think a lot of times we tell ourselves, hey, maybe I'm an emerging leader, but I'll get developed enough. And oftentimes I'm just like, actually, maybe what you need more than competency is the courage to just start. Like you probably have enough competency to help somebody else get to where they need to go because you're here and you're asking that question, do you have enough courage to take that risk? That's one of the questions that I always ask people.
I think that you're onto something with the idea that courage tends to precede confidence. Um, I would maybe word it this way, and I don't know if there's good research to support this, but I would suggest that courage is more associated with motivation, whereas confidence is associated with behavior. Um, if you're going to actually act in a certain way, a confidence is the capacity to actually act, whereas courage is developing the sense of motivation, the will to do something. Um, and for sure, I think that you're right that usually motivation precedes behavior. But I would suggest to you that there's also certain circumstances where we act um, without thinking very much about it, and perhaps that's going to be um, a less of a linear process through courage, and perhaps just um, in a crisis, for example, we might jump on despite not really knowing whether we can or can't do something, and
Honestly, we talk probably 50% of our podcast about the acute stress response because my experience with leaders is that they're encountering the acute stress response on a high level of frequency, and most of them are ill-equipped to deal with it, which is why high performers end up pursuing things like substance abuse and high risk relationships and other very adrenaline seeking things. In fact, one of our favorite podcasts was with a CEO of a Happy named James Lawrence, and he is like a pilot and a race car driver, and he's like bought and sold multiple businesses. And I'm like, okay, you are like the quintessential high performer. Keep channeling all of that, energy into healthy things and staying very sober, right?
Yeah, because your adrenaline rushes,
A recent podcast with Justin Benson where it's like, hey, his therapist looks at him and says, dude, or therapist coach looks at him and says, dude, you exist in avalanche territory. And look, that's how the creator created you. There's nothing I can do about that, but I can help you learn how to survive a perpetual avalanche, right? Because this is how you're designed. And so Justin has learned how to snowboard, right? He's learned how to, survive the avalanches of his existence. And I think helping circling back a little bit, I think helping people understand that leadership is very stressful. And when an emerging or a new leader is entering into a culture and there are these tenured sort of advanced level leaders, they actually have to be thinking through what does it feel? How do I prepare for the feelings of stress? How do I prepare for all these unknowns, the intimidation of these different relationships? So I'm curious, Daniel, when when you are maybe giving someone the tips and the tricks of socialization, how do you help tenured leaders think through what to actually do with new people coming into a culture in order to assimilate them or to socialize them in a way that's like healthy and most efficient?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So I have some research on this that highlights 6 practices that are pretty common for socialization. And off the top of my head, I'm probably not going to get all 6 of them, but I can try. The first is probably the most commonly studied, which is what we call realistic job previews. The reality is, most of the time, people come in expecting something different than what they get, and this is what creates shock, right? It's exactly what you're talking about.
So true.
Uncertainty reduction theory is kind of the academic language behind it. Uncertainty reduction theory says give them a realistic picture. If you're a great leader, the first thing you can do is be really honest. Be really honest. And be really honest in a way that's not just the negatives, not just the positive, but it's realistic. The best way to do that is to ask somebody who's actually already doing it. Say, hey, can you write up a little bit of a day in the life, and just be really honest about it. Kind of give me the good and the bad, a whole mix of things. And then that's how realistic job previews typically get formed. Give that information to somebody so that they have a real sense for what they're walking into. That's one of the first and most important things. Another thing that people do is what's called expectation lowering procedures, which is kind of ridiculous, but it's basically, hey, we know that you think the grass is greener. That's what people always think when they start something new. It's not going to be greener. This is a job, this is work. Just be prepared for that, right? That's what we call expectation lowering procedure. So those are two things that people do, yeah, for sure. But then socialization has other things, something like what we call cultivating organizational knowledge and identity, which is it's stuff you think about in onboarding, right? Here's stuff about our company that you need to know, and here's some sweatshirts, with our brand on it, and like you can start feeling like a part of this. And so that's maybe some, another thing that people do. Um, is that going to address somebody's shock when they enter in and they experience these surprising things? Maybe not as much. It's less associated with that. Um, but there's a growing stream of research that looks at what we call proactivity. And proactivity says generally when you start something, you're a little nervous about acknowledging that you don't know what you're doing. And so the best thing a leader can do is encourage you to be proactive. Hey, I expect you to have lots of questions. I'd like for you to maybe send me 5 questions at the end of every day. I want you to send me 5 things that you're still confused about at the end of every day for the next 3 weeks. And this is just an opportunity for me to force you to really be thinking about proactively seeking out the help that you still need. Because proactivity is something that really gets cut off when you stop being a newcomer in terms of really seeking out the help you need. You feel like, I can't ask that. I'm supposed to know that already, right? Surely I'm supposed to have this down. And so if you as a leader are in a position to invite that, not just to yourself, but to the people that might be more accessible or approachable to that person, that's that is associated with a lot more positive adjustment, which is the main thing we look for socialization. That people adjust, that they don't turn over, they don't leave, they don't burn out, things like that. And so, if you can encourage productivity, that's coming out in the research more and more as really one of the strongest predictors of adjustment that you can actually do.
That's so great, man. Because that just kind of normalizes the whole process in a way. In the way that I'm hearing that is like, okay, great. Because you're going to go through the honeymoon phase, and you're going to think that, hey, this place is so great, and the grass is greener. We've all done it, right? This place is awesome. I can't wait. And then you kind of get through it, and you're like, it's a job. I kind of forgot that it's a job. So if you can normalize that and then remind people, hey, my expectation is not that you know everything. Like, because as humans, it seems like, and I don't have the research that you do, but I just know from my own experience, when I go in, I kind of have the assumption, maybe I'll give myself a little bit of grace at the beginning, but like I should know because I've been hired for this position, right? So it feels like, hey, if you can invite that, that just seems like it'd be, you'd want to know that as a leader too. If your team is confused, you just don't always feel the freedom to ask, right? So I think that I've been there. I worked at a company for a long time where I was like trying to figure stuff out and YouTube and things and going, and then people are like, hey, how come you didn't ask? I was like, I didn't want to bother. I thought I should have known, or I can figure it out. And I'm going, how much time did I waste? And how much did I not empower my own company to be better by missing those? So just, we're almost at time here. I'm kind of wondering, Daniel, as we wrap this up, man, what is like what is something that you would encourage any team to do with their new team members? I mean, you've given us a bunch of things, but if you're like, hey, all right, so thinking about socialization and organizational behavior, if you're like, hey, my one takeaway, or there's one or maybe two things that I would encourage, team leaders to do, it would be X.
For new people in particular, um, I think I would summarize it to say, make sure they know they're not alone. If you're going to be a really great leader, what it means is you're at very least shoulder to shoulder with that person, if not coming along behind or supporting them. Um, and I think that so often when we bring new people in, and leaders have to deal with this more and more in our day and age, we're constantly changing team membership. If you can come alongside a new person and say, hey, you're not alone. I'm your leader and I'm here for you. If you need to ask me a question and it's 6 months in and you still don't know where the bathroom is, I'm here for it. And if you can create that culture, create that norm within your team as well, that there's an expectation of that, to where people know that they're integrated socially, right, which is what we call facilitating social integration, that they're able to proactively acknowledge what their needs are, and that they're able to identify their effective task behaviors, the things that would make them effective. Those 3 things put together are the kind of golden key, for somebody to feel like I'm not alone. I have the resources I need, and I can settle in.
That's so good, man. That's so
I
good.
love it.
No, I appreciate it, man. This has
Yeah, man.
been fantastic.
That is an immediate
Yeah.
application for any leader who's listening today.
Yeah,
So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that. That's your practicality corner,
Yeah, we have
Taylor.
like 7. It was so good.
I'm glad. Yeah, thanks, guys. This has been really great. Really great. I'm glad to get to share too.
Yeah, man. If our listeners want to learn more about you, about what you're up to, about your research, how could they do that?
Yeah, probably the easiest way would just be to email me at daniel_watts@baylor.edu. I'm not great on the socials, so I wish I could say, oh, follow me or something like that.
We got to get
Don't
you a
have that.
Substack, man. We got to
That's
get you
what
a
it is.
Substack with like a $50 subscription fee or something. Come on.
I need to learn from you guys. You're the pros. We'll maybe do another session where I get to just learn and listen to you guys talk about your expertise there because you guys are crushing it. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way would be to email, and I'm happy to set up chats or come by or meet up in person, things like that. And that's stuff that I'm excited about. I'm passionate about this and happy to share it.
Daniel, thank you for your time, brother. This has been a lot of fun, and we look forward to. We're coming up on season 2 planning. We're about a month away from season 2 planning, so we're going to be getting back on your schedule, and we'll talk about some of the other research that you're in the midst of doing in your role at Baylor, and some of the cool day-to-day stuff that you're up to.
That'd be great. Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys. This was really sweet and really great opportunity. So good to connect with you, Taylor, and great to see you again, Brad.
All right, guys. Taylor, give our listeners instructions for what to do next. Tattoo, uh, shave the logo in your head.
God, yeah, go get the Daily Leader tattoo. You can do that too. You can get the sweatshirt we don't have, but you can buy a sweatshirt and put our logo on it and then send us a picture. We'd actually appreciate that. Probably go do that. That'd be awesome. In the meantime, if you don't do any of those things, like, subscribe, follow us, that would be wonderful. Tell your mother, your father, your sister, brother to do the same thing. And with that, we'll be back again next week.